Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Welcome back to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. I'm your host, Michael Clogs. And updates from the United Nations. The Secretary General apparently is going to be going to a meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky and Recep Tayyip of Turkey, and apparently they're talking more and more about the Black Sea Grain Initiative and the idea of getting the grain from out of the Odessa port and getting it into Turkey and thus to points around the world. And there's updates from Kenya, where the Secretary General spoke with William Ruto, and they spoke based on the expressed admiration on the way Kenya conducted elections and hopes that the democratic process will continue. Along with that, of course, we've been talking about the idea that it is 1 year since the Taliban has taken over Afghanistan, and the things that have happened. We mentioned yesterday about women aging out of the education process by the time they hit the 6th grade. There's other things, and we're going to have a message from Deputy Special Representatives of the Secretary General of the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan speaking, and he's going to be briefing from a remote location in Afghanistan and talking about humanitarian efforts and the mission about what is happening in Afghanistan. The UNAMA officials stressed humanitarian conditions remain dire. If heartbreaking scenes, you have children who are malnourished, and the outcomes are going to be very negative. They will not survive winter, as a lot of dire messages coming from out of Afghanistan, where not only we're talking about education, but more dire messages over medications, food. The basic needs of life are suffering in Afghanistan, as well as remembering that for women and girls who they are considered to be second-class citizens, that the dire straits become even worse because, well, it's the food is to be given to the boys first. The medications are to be given, and medical treatments are to be given to the men first. So it's not necessarily especially a great area for women, but we're going to hear more from that in today's show with a recording from the representative from the UN AMA, or the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan. So let's move forward with the show, and do bear in mind the questions are being to be asked are, what more can we do to help our global community and our brothers and sisters around the world to get through tough times, help deliver food, services, medications, and education.
Mr. Alakbarov, yes, we're going to get started right now, and we have some audience here, and some more people will be coming in, but we'll get started now. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're very pleased to have with us today as our guest, Ramiz Alakbarov, who, as you know, is the Deputy Special Representative and Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator for Afghanistan. He's joining us by video from Kabul to brief as we reach 1 year since the Taliban takeover in the Afghan capital. Mr. Alakbarov, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and I hope I'm audible from Kabul. First of all, thank you for gathering today and looking at the current situation where we have, of course, seen the 15 August, 1 year of the changes in Kabul. So what we can say about this, that throughout this year, the humanitarian actors, the UN agencies, humanitarian agencies, all partners who decided to stay and deliver in Afghanistan over this period of time have maintained probably the largest and the most unprecedented humanitarian lifeline delivery operation for the people of Afghanistan. More specifically, in that period of time, we have reached more than 22.9 million people, at least one form of humanitarian assistance, and we were able to provide this support in more than 401 all of the country's districts. And that represents quite an impressive reach out to the estimated 95% of the population which required assistance. Now, having said this, through the winter, which we crossed with generous support of the donors, the worst case scenario, which is the famine, a widespread famine in Afghanistan, was avoided. With the strong support of the health actors, the national health system was shouldered, and the hospitals maintained operationality, and the staff of the hospitals were paid. We provided targeted interventions to support the education sector, including providing the salaries for the teachers. It is regrettable that to the date, the schools for girls remain above secondary level, remains to be closed, and unfortunately 80% of the schoolgirls, 850,000 estimated out of 1.1 million in 2021, were not able to reach the schools. We could say that a lot has been done in terms of also supporting the ongoing humanitarian crisis related to floods and to the earthquakes. As you know, Afghanistan was stricken by a very, very difficult earthquake in the areas of Sera, Barmal, Gyan. UN has maintained a scaled operation to respond to this particular crisis. We also provided more than $1 billion in cash towards the relief operations. These are essential payments made in cash by the United Nations towards the humanitarian causes and humanitarian operations in the country, but that also provided an additional beneficiary effect to the banking sector. All in all, we could say that throughout these interventions, the lives of millions of people, of Afghans, were saved, community education programs were supported, health outreach was sustained, and the worst case scenario was averted. I would like to say the generosity of our donors remains steady. We have received about $1.8 billion this year, and we consider it's a generous contribution. It, of course, is only 40% of what we asked from the overall requirement of $4.4 billion, leaving a gap of $2.6 billion. And right now, as we look at the situation in Afghanistan, as the result of the global food crisis, as the result of the economic decline which is in place in the country, the price of the food basket is nearly 30% up, actually 29% up. And that requires an immediate and urgent attention. We are very grateful for all the contributions which were received. Actually, I would say that 90 partners of the Central Emergency Relief Fund and of Afghanistan Humanitarian Fund projects. Sorry, there's interfering noise on live. Yes, it's gone. So it is good to see that we actually have this strong community on the ground, but we need to have more resources, and they definitely need to continue to scale up. Overall, this year we will continue to have a situation where the 19 million people remain food insecure in Afghanistan, which is a reflection of the overall economic situation, reflection of the poverty levels, of the economic decline. And out of this amount, $6.6 million are the people who are in a IPC4 emergency level, which is very, very high level of food insecurity. Around 25 million people in Afghanistan today are living in poverty, which is up from 20 million in 2016. We have seen outbreaks of cholera. We have seen increased level of diseases, not just among the humans, but also among the animals. The situation with the livestock is also alarming. This country suffers from continued effects of climate change. There are floods which are taking place now as we speak in the southern regions, and this is just another effect of continued deforestation, land which has lost its ability to resist strong flows, and now we are facing this difficult situation in Jalalabad and in a few other provinces as of this evening. But that's a reflection of the impact of the climate change on the country. Moving forward, our humanitarian needs will continue to be large, but the humanitarian assistance alone is not enough. We need to be able to address the underlying causes of the vulnerabilities of Afghan people, which is obviously, I spoke about the climate change, but the fundamental driver is the poverty of the Afghan village, is the lack of development in the agrarian sector. Agro-food systems need to be restored, and the basic level jobs need to be created to provide a greater sustainability. Without functional markets, without operating banking sector, without investments in basic level jobs, we will not be able to reverse the trends which we are observing now in Afghanistan. We will not be able to bring people from surviving into a thriving mode. And right now, the attention is again on the need to provide humanitarian assistance, need to provide food, need to provide medicines, but we also need to consider how to move forward now 1 year on, and how to deal with the chronic crisis and the chronic humanitarian issue in Afghanistan with limited development toolbox available. I will stop there for her, and we'll be very glad to answer any questions which may be asked. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. I'll open up the floor for questions. Just to let you know, there's been some audio difficulty, so we might sometimes need you to repeat some things, but we'll now turn to Edie Lederer.
Thank you very much on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association. Welcome, and thank you for doing this briefing. My name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. A couple of questions. First, I believe you said that you've only received $1.8 billion of $4.4 billion that you've requested. What's going to happen if you don't get a significant amount more of the money that you needed, particularly as you're going into winter? And I wonder if you could tell us the status of the billions of dollars held by the U.S. Some of it was supposed to be returned, but has anything happened, or is it still tied up in courts? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. The situation can be best described as a pure catastrophe because every time you go here into the hospitals and you visit them, and I just did a live on Sky News with an amazing coverage from the Kabul hospitals by journalists. It's a heartbreaking scenes. You have children malnourished, in dystrophical condition. The outcomes for them are going to be very negative. They will not survive this winter. Large groups of population in remote areas where the winter is harsh. Afghanistan has very harsh winters. The temperatures are very cold. And indeed, it can lead only to very negative consequences. The people of Afghanistan are known for their resilience and their ability to survive. Unfortunately, negative coping strategies for Afghanistan have been already quite seen. You've seen people selling organs. You've seen people selling children. This has been widely covered in the media. So this is what we will be seeing again if support is not provided. As far as we're looking at the winter and what's going to happen in a few months, Secretary General has made it very clear in his previous statements that frozen assets and frozen temperatures don't make good combinations. As far as the state of the current negotiations within the countries which have in their possession parts of the reserves, these negotiations are being conducted between the de facto authorities and the member states, and the United Nations is not a part of these negotiations. And as far as I know, there was no any outcome on the ongoing discussions in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the briefing. Just a quick follow-up to Edie's question. Can you put a number, an estimated number on like how many lives might be at stake throughout the winter?
We're talking about millions.
Hi, Mr. Akbarov. Nice to talk to you again. This is Deju Xu with China Central Television. Two questions. First, follow up with Edith. Last week, more than 70 economists sent a letter to President Biden to urge release the frozen assets. Just want to know first, what's your stand? And second, would it make a difference if they release the asset? And second, I just want to know, since it's been a year that Taliban took office there, do you feel they're cooperative enough for your humanitarian work? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I am aware about the letter which was sent, and it expresses the view of the group of very known and leading economists. From our sides, again, UN has been very clear about this issue. Definitely injection of cash into the economy and injection of financial resources into the economy of the country will cause a positive humanitarian outcomes, because the restoration of an economic activity will be very important for the country to recover and to create a condition that the people can feed themselves. However, we need to talk about a broader context of the economic recovery. For this, trade routes have to be functional. The banking system will need to be operational. International transactions will need to resume in order to facilitate the operations in the sector. And let's also be very frank, there is exemptions and licenses and many specific permissive environment decisions which have been adopted. So a lot of these delays are also related to the fact that there is a chilling effect. Even then, there are, let's say, exemptions, and there are the possibilities for the private sector to operate normally. The decisions are also being made by the private businesses and the banks simply not to engage with Afghanistan. And this is called a chilling effect. So it's not necessarily that it is prohibited. It is just because the partners from outside of Afghanistan, just because it's Afghanistan and because of the nature of what is happening in Afghanistan, are not willing to engage more productively or within the existing permissive environment. So that's one element. The second, then, it comes to your question of how cooperative the de facto authorities of Afghanistan there. We can say that they've been very consistent in providing security guarantees. And we actually had, and we do have, a consistent access to the entire territory of the country. When individual interferences take place, they largely take place at the decentralized level, and we are able to deconflict them. So overall, we were able to deliver the humanitarian assistance throughout the country, and whenever we faced restrictions or difficulties, we were able to resolve them through the means of discussions, negotiations, and clarifications. I hope that answers the questions you asked.
On the first question, I have a follow-up. So do you also urge the international community to, let's say, drop some of those sanctions for Afghan, or do you have any other suggestions on that?
As I said, we need to have these assets returned to Afghanistan. And I know that there are negotiations which are going on about those returns. And I know that the proposals have been made on the specific conditions, how, for instance, the private sector assets could be returned. So the flexibility needs to be exercised on both sides. But again, as United Nations, we are not part of these negotiations, and we are not aware of the details which are being discussed. So let's be very clear about that. It's a matter which is handled between the member states.
Kristen?
Hi, Kristen Salumi from Al Jazeera. You mentioned the need to address the underlying issues and release that funding for Afghanistan. Is there a way, if the United States is unwilling to give that money to the Taliban or give the Taliban control over that money, that the United Nations could apply it and address some of those underlying issues in your view? Thanks.
Can you clarify the issue? Sorry, the connection was not very... can you repeat your question? Connection was a bit choppy.
If the United States is unwilling to release that money to the Taliban or to the Taliban's control, is there a way that the UN could facilitate in helping address the underlying issues that you mentioned needed to be fixed in terms of agriculture and banking and so on? Could the UN assist in some way to get that money to the people of Afghanistan without it going to the Taliban? Is that possible in your view?
We have made a number of propositions to address some of the matters which you are talking about. One of it, for instance, was a proposed humanitarian exchange platform which we have offered to the de facto authorities of Afghanistan to serve as a platform for, let's say, private businesses to make the international banking transactions through a UN-facilitated and supported environment. That has been one of the offerings on the table for a long time. And inflexibility in these matters is one of the facts which we're facing, and it is related to the fact that sometimes probably there is not enough technical competence to understand what it is that they're offering. Or on the other hand, there is also a desire to maintain a very, very, let's say, stiff positions on where these matters are to be taken. Again, from within of the perspective of the United Nations, our key objective here is to provide humanitarian assistance and to facilitate humanitarian transactions. Whenever we are being approached by the member states or the de facto authorities of Afghanistan to facilitate one or the other matter, we do provide the suggestions on how this is to be addressed. However, these particular topics about the assets, about the banks, and other transactions are not explicitly referred to the United Nations, and we do not currently participate actively in the resolution of this crisis, except of providing the payments towards the legitimate humanitarian and basic human needs expenses in the country, and through actually providing a cash platform, which is basically shipping banknotes to the country. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. Yes. Quick follow-up. Did you say it's 9 million food insecure? I couldn't understand the number.
It is 6.6 million, 6.6 million people, and this is an absolute highest number of people in this condition in any country in the world right now.
Is there a percentage?
Well, if you...
I can do the math if I have to.
There's approximately 40 million people in Afghanistan, and 6.6 will make a proportion you can calculate it. Yeah.
Fethi?
Thank you very much, Ahmed Fathi, ATN News. Just when you said that the price of food have increased 30% in Afghanistan, to my best of my information, Afghanistan is predominantly an agricultural country. And according to the UN ODC, that during 2020, the production of heroin in Afghanistan was 590 tons, while in 2021, the same production was 650 tons of heroin produced. This is yielded from almost 450,000 acres. I don't understand how come a country which have vast areas suitable for agriculture does not have much trade with the outside world. The price of food would go exponentially, like 30% in 1 year. Do you have an explanation for that?
Yes, and I will gladly provide that. First of all, it's not 30, it's 29%, but it's almost the same. So the reasons for that are very simple. In the last 4 years, Afghanistan had 2 droughts in a row. 2 droughts in a row. During these droughts, the Afghan farmers have borrowed money towards their own survival against the future harvests. Moreover, they have sold out most of their livestock to survive these 2 droughts, the one of the last year and the one of the 2018. As you move forward from that place in space, currently there is a dramatic shortage of fertilizers and a dramatic shortage of pesticides, which has already impacted the harvest, even though the rainfall was relatively acceptable and the snowfall was relatively better this winter than the previous one. So as the result of it, I'll give you an example of my meeting with the farmers in the Parvan province. If they have a yield of, let's say, 500 tons of cereal or any other product from the territory they make, after they pay back for the debts which they have taken, and plus they pay out whatever is their dues, the amount which is left to the peasant or to the farmer to have for him herself is the 10% of that, which is 50 out of 500. This gives you an example of extreme indebtedness and poverty. Now, if you would go further and you say, yes, I agree with you, that the agricultural land of Afghanistan is in general fertile, but with very poor water management practices, with deep indebtedness, and with a total lack of infrastructure and mechanical production facilitation, such as machinery or a storage of the harvest which is already collected, the situation is very difficult. They have no storage facilities to store harvest which they make, including simple things such as potatoes, onions. They're being sold to neighboring countries, and then a few months later they are stored, and a few months later the product are being brought back to the market and resold at 3 times the price. So the fundamental issue which we're dealing here with is not the quality of the land or availability of the labor force, but the fact that there is no infrastructure, there is no facilities for storaging, there is no fertilizers, there is no insecticides, and there is no mechanization. The fundamental requirement of Afghanistan is a huge change in agro-food systems, which would drive that village outside of the poverty. But investments for this area of work are not available right now. I hope I answered your question.
Thanks. Next question goes to Pam Falk from online.
Thank you very much for the briefing. It's Pamela Falk from CBS News. To the first question, you talked about a catastrophe. Could you be a little more specific? You've been very specific about food needs and medicine. What would you say is the priority that's driving Afghanistan to a catastrophe? Could you just give us some specifics? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So we need to reach a large amount of people, and this is not just, let's say, for the food. We are talking about, for instance, health sector. Health sector, the health needs and their uncovered needs we are talking about 11 million people. When we are talking about essential supplies such as, let's say, rehabilitation items for the displaced or the people who have been affected by the earthquake and they need the house to be repaired or displaced. We're talking about more than 2 million people. In the earthquake area alone, nearly 100,000 people will require assistance in terms of just providing for the requirements of the housing to be rebuilt. So in education sector, we're talking about 500,000 people to be provided with just community-based emergency interventions just to keep people literate and keep them studying. Nutrition. Nutrition is another important area related, of course, to food, but that's where we provide an intensive nutrition to those children who are failing, and that's more than 1.2 million people. Protection needs, nearly 900,000 people. So the whole gamut of the 20 million people, which nearly 20 million people, 19,300,000, is coming up from the needs in various sectors. So this is overall level of vulnerability when we're talking about the needs. I answered your question.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And now we also have a question online from Benny Avni. Benny?
I'm sorry, Farhan. I wanted a question for you rather than to our guest.
Oh, in that case, you'll have to wait for my comrade Stefan Dujuric's part of the briefing, which will be right after this one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are there any further questions in the room for Mr. Alakbarov? Edie.
I'll ask one more question. There have been some concerns about the possible diversion of humanitarian aid to the Taliban and the quality of monitoring of where aid is going, particularly in many of the rural areas. Could you address that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this particular point in time, we have no any financial transactions with the de facto authorities. And when it comes to aid distribution or provision aid directly to the population groups, there is very little space for this aid diversion to take place. Afghanistan is a high-risk operating environment. It has always been a high-risk operating environment, and it was so in the past as well. I would say that right now, most of the transactions are going either from major international institutions, such as UN agencies and NGOs, and while the robust systems of third-party monitoring are also being put in place. So I would rather say that the application of know your client approach, of the third-party monitoring, and of the risk management approaches by the agencies which are delivering aid on the ground is rather robust. I have no reports of any aid diversion in my hands or which were brought to our attention, and we have quite an extensive surveillance systems and monitoring systems to detect such transactions. Of course, we are very much alert to any potential, and this is being taken very seriously at all levels, and corresponding relevant investments were made by all agencies making the transactions. When I go to the field, and I do that very often, and it is on my Twitter account and in my social media and on the UN websites, I take particular attention to see that every distribution site has independent monitoring. I have seen it functional, where every person who had benefited from assistance provided by the United Nations and its partner is actually being asked in a separate place by an independent monitor that anyone had actually approached to ask any favor or took anything back from them. So we are taking this very, very serious, and I would say that at this particular time, the probability of such an act always exists, but it's not very, very probable because we're in a high-risk environment, but we're taking every mitigation measure possible, and it's being taken very, very seriously. I hope I answered your question.
Thanks, and I'd like to thank once again our guest, Ramiz Alakbarov, who is the Deputy Special Representative of the Secretary General for Afghanistan and the Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator. Thanks in particular for providing this briefing on what must be a fairly late evening for you, and I hope you have a great rest of your night.
Thank you very much, Farhan, and it's a pleasure. I'm always happy to speak about Afghanistan. And I would like to thank yourself and most of all our journalists for continuing keeping attention on Afghanistan these days. Afghanistan needs solidarity, and people of Afghanistan need our support these days. So it's great that we have such a great interest and support from international media. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Have a good night. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we'll turn the floor over to our esteemed comrade Stefan Dujarric, who will provide the next part of the briefing. He should be here in any second.
All right, good afternoon. We'll actually start off with some news. Get your pens ready. At the invitation of President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, the Secretary General will be in Lviv on Thursday to attend a trilateral meeting with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey and the Ukrainian leader. The Secretary General will then go on to Odessa the next day, where he will visit the port that is one of the three being used as part of the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Before returning to New York over the weekend, the Secretary General will be in Istanbul to visit the Joint Coordination Center set up to implement the initiative. As you will all recall, this initiative is part of a deal that also includes the facilitation of Russian grain and fertilizer exports onto the global market. linked to that initiative, the first maritime shipment of Ukrainian wheat for humanitarian operation run by the United Nations World Food Program left Ukraine today. It is another important milestone in efforts to get much needed Ukrainian grain out of the conflict-hit country back onto the global markets and to countries most affected by the global food crisis. The shipment of 23,000 metric tons of wheat will go to WFP's humanitarian response in the Horn of Africa, where the threat of famine stalks the drought-hit region. It is one of many areas around the world where near complete halt of Ukrainian grain and food import on the global market has made life even harder for families already struggling with rising hunger. According to the World Food Program, a record 345 million people in 82 countries are now facing acute food insecurity, while up to 50 million people in 45 countries are right on the edge of famine and risk being tipped over without humanitarian support. The World Food Program notes that with commercial and humanitarian maritime traffic now resuming in and out of the Black Sea ports, Ukraine's Black Sea ports, some global supply disruptions will ease with relief for countries facing the worst of the global food crisis. Crucially, WFP says it will allow Ukraine to empty its grain storage silos ahead of the summer season harvest. WFP says that despite these positive developments, the world still faces an unprecedented food crisis. They stress that immediate action is needed to bring together humanitarian community, governments, and the private sector to save lives and invest in long-term solutions. On Kenya, I just want to flag to you that a very short while ago, the Secretary General spoke by phone with William Ruto, and will try to speak with Raila Odinga tomorrow based on Mr. Odinga's own availability. The Secretary General expressed his admiration for the way the Kenyans conducted these elections and hopes the process is concluded soon within the existing constitutional and legal framework. Today, the Secretary General has appointed 10 high-level and eminent persons to serve on the inaugural Internet Governance Forum Leadership Panel. In line with the mandate of the Internet Governance Forum, it has, as recommended in the Secretary General's roadmap for digital cooperation, he has established the panel as a strategic, empowered, and multi-stakeholder body to support and strengthen Internet Governance Forum. The panel will address strategic and urgent issues and highlight forum discussions and possible follow-up actions. The list of the 10 distinguished members on the panel and 5 ex officio members are available in a press release that is being released right now. Excuse me, the internet always does that to me. Turning to Myanmar, you will have seen that yesterday we issued press release saying that the Special Envoy, the Secretary General for Myanmar, Nolene Heiser, traveled yesterday to that country, following up on the latest call from the Secretary General, from the Security Council for an immediate cessation of all forms of violence and unimpeded humanitarian access to all those in need. She will focus on addressing the deteriorating situation and immediate concerns, as well as other priority areas of her mandate. The Special Envoy's visit follows her extensive consultations with people from across the political spectrum, civil society, as well as communities impacted by the ongoing conflict. And an update from Mali, where UN peacekeeping troop rotations resumed yesterday with a contingent from Bangladesh. Some 400 soldiers from Senegal are also slated to rotate soon. We welcome the coordination efforts between the Malian transitional government and our peacekeeping mission. We are also grateful for the more than 60 troop and police contributing countries for their continued and commitment to peace in Mali. And the UN peacekeeping force in the Democratic Republic of the Congo reports that it evacuated 16 civilians who were seriously wounded during an attack carried out by Zaire militia in the Damas area in Ituri province. The civilians were airlifted by helicopters to Bunia at the request of the provincial authorities. The mission reiterates its determination to continue delivering on the protection of civilians mandate in support of the Congolese authorities. And we have an update from our team in Cuba, led by the resident coordinator, Consuelo Vidal, as they continue engaging with the government and partners to support needs following the multiple explosions of fuel tanks in the provinces of Matanza 9 days ago. The UN team is gearing efforts to provide water treatment plants and pumps as well as health supplies. We've also offered expertise to assess the possible environmental damage and impacts of the economy and services offered to the local population. And one note to you, an interesting event took place in the Swiss capital of Bern. The president of the Swiss Confederation, Ignacio Cassis, and the Minister of Justice of Uzbekistan, Ruslanbek Davletov, signed an agreement on the restitution of funds to be returned to the people of Uzbekistan through a UN-managed trust fund to support the ongoing work of the Sustainable Development Goals in the Central Asian countries. The funding will arrive in Uzbekistan in multiple tranches. At present, some $131 million are already to be returned. The money will be channeled through the UN's Multi-Partnership Office Gateway Fund, and it is part of a partnership between our UN team on the ground in Uzbekistan, led by Resident Coordinator Roli Astana, and the government of Uzbekistan. At the event in Bern today, Ms. Astana welcomed both countries' initiative, saying the UN is committed to helping ensure that the resources are used to strengthen public trust by providing tangible and sustainable benefits and improvements to the lives of the people of Uzbekistan. And lastly, today marks 5 years since the Minamata Convention on Mercury entered into force. The convention protects human health and environment from the adverse effects of mercury. Mercury's toxicity devastated the fishing village of Minamata Bay in Japan in the middle of the 20th century, and as a result, government took action and adopted the convention in 2013, and it entered into force 5 years ago. The UN Environment Program administers the agreement, which has 137 parties. Its provisions include a ban on new mercury mines and the phase-out of mercury use in a number of products. Edie.
Thank you very much, Steph. A couple of questions on follow-ups to the Secretary General's travels to Ukraine. Can you tell us what the purpose of the meeting with President Zelensky and President Erdogan is?
It's at the invitation of President Zelensky. Obviously, part of it will be to review the grain, the workings of the Black Sea Grain Initiative, which Turkey is a critical part of. And obviously, we do expect a bilateral meeting between the Secretary General and President Zelensky at some point. Some of those details are still being worked out.
Do you expect the situation at the Zaporizhia nuclear plant to be raised? And also, well, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't want to preempt your question.
And is there any possible talk about a possible ceasefire talks, peace agreement in those discussions?
I mean, there will be obviously there are a number of issues that will be raised. The conflict in general, the need for a political solution to this conflict. I have no doubt that the issue of the nuclear power plant, the fact-finding mission, and others will be raised. On the power plant, I mean, there's been no change, though, as in our position, as stated yesterday, that it is that we were there to support the IAEA implementation of its mandate, and we're ready to support it logistically and security-wise from Kyiv.
And a follow-up, has there been any word from the IAEA on their plans?
No, I think you need to ask them. Bitul.
I can just follow up on the SG's visit. How long does he plan to stay in Ukraine, and when does he plan to be in Turkey? And during his visit in Istanbul, does he plan to meet the president of Turkey?
He will see the president. He will see the president in Lviv. He'll see President Erdogan in Lviv as part of the trilateral meeting. The focus of the stay in Turkey, which will be rather short, in Istanbul, is the the visit to the Joint Coordination Center, and then whether or not we have other bilateral meetings in Istanbul, that is still has to be fleshed out.
And
that
can
will be
you
Saturday.
tell me when?
Saturday.
Oh, Saturday. Thanks.
Benno.
Thank you, Steph. Also, follow up to the travel announcement. You said part of it will be to review the grain experts and their working, but there was a fourth party to that deal, which is Russia, and they are not there. Is that not a problem?
Well,
if you reviewed with just two leaders?
The Secretary General had a very good conversation with the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation yesterday, Mr. Shoigu, in which those discussions were also touched upon the Black Sea Grain Initiative, as well as the other part of the deal, which is the facilitation of Russian grain and fertilizer onto the global market. Edward.
Yeah, so a follow-up on the readout of the phone call with Shoigu. Can you tell us how long has the Secretary General been talked with the Defense Minister on that phone, and which is the main topic? Because you listed like 3 different topics: the nuclear plant, the Black Sea Grain Initiative, as well as I kind of forgot the other one. Sorry. Oh yeah, the fact-finding mission in relation of the prison.
I mean, it's an extremely valid question, but I'm not going to go into timing, detailed word count on those, which issue had more time, which one had less. All of these are very important. They're all part of the broader issue of the war that's going on in Ukraine.
And may I add another question also concerning the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant? Because yesterday, the Russian side expressed their concern about safety issue if they want to, cross, let's say, from Kiev to cross the front line to the nuclear plant. And yesterday, during the phone call, has the Secretary General talked about this issue with the Defense Minister?
Look, the Secretary General is not in the lead in negotiating the implementation of the IAEA's mandate, right? That is their responsibility. They're an independent, specialized agency. It's not for us to tell them what to do and what not to do. The point of our message is that we are here to help. We can help them logistically, security-wise, coming from Kyiv. Right.
Thank you, Stefan. According to the Libyan PR, Mr. Tahar Senni, none of the Security Council members objected to the designation of the Senegali diplomat Abdoulaye Bitari as a special representative in Libya. So, except that the Libyan government that he represents has an objection on this appointment. My question is the Secretary General obliged to take into consideration this objection and reservation, or is it just the security members' position?
There is a process of consultation that took place. There's a process of consultation that is ongoing. Once that's finished, we will make the announcement. We make an announcement officially. Edie.
Thank you. One follow-up on the Secretary General's visit to the joint center in Istanbul. Will the new head of the center
It's a good question.
be there?
I was asking myself that question. I don't know if he will be there yet. Either he will be there or Fred Kenny will receive the Secretary General.
And is there any update on what Nolene Heiser has been doing in Myanmar today?
No, the visit's ongoing. She will issue I think an extensive readout and release after her visit, but we're not, we're not saying what she's doing now, and frankly, I don't know, which is probably the better answer. Benno.
I would like to follow up on Edward's question about Russia saying it might be very hard to cross front lines. I know you're not dealing with that directly, but can you tell me, didn't UN personal cross front lines in this conflict before? For example, Avostal or something else. It doesn't sound to me like something totally new.
Let's look at the facts. The facts that you stated are correct, right? We helped coordinate with the ICRC a very delicate operation that crossed lines between when we evacuated civilians from the Azovstal plant. We've had, since the beginning of this conflict back in 2014, there were a number of humanitarian convoys that crossed the if I'm not mistaken, it is the line of contact in the east to deliver humanitarian aid. So those are facts. The fact is that it is also an active war zone. So all those facts are true. All those things have to be worked through with the parties. You obviously, I mean, it's an obvious statement to make, but you're not going to cross front lines without the agreement of both parties. Yes, sir.
I have a question on the Secretary General's visit to Ukraine. He arrives in addition to the meetings, is he planning to visit somewhere in Ukraine? Because he arrives in Ukraine on Thursday and arrives in
so he will be in
Saturday.
Lviv on Thursday, and he will be the next day, he will be in Odessa, and then the next day he will be in Istanbul.
Okay.
There may be to say that this visit is a work in progress would be a true statement. So there may be changes here and there on locations, but the ones I have announced are confirmed. Mr. Bulkati.
Very much appreciate. I have a short follow-up, Stefan, regarding the Benos question on safety. As he mentioned, Russian side says that it's pretty unsafe to cross contact line while going via Kiev to visit this Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Is the UN ready to facilitate the other route, for example, from Russian territory?
I think my statement yesterday was very clear, that we are willing and able to help the IAEA in any way we can, and we have the logistics and security. We have the logistics and security apparatus to do that from Kyiv. Okay. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Luke. I'm from the Times of Israel. I wanted to ask about Sarah Muscroft, who was removed from her post after criticizing Islamic Jihad. Israel has asked that she be reinstated. Does the Secretary General have any intention to get involved?
She was not let go in any way, shape, or form. Her location of work has been changed, and that's a decision taken by our humanitarian affairs colleagues.
And she will stay there?
She's being reassigned to a different post. I don't know what that post yet is.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I also wanted to ask if the Secretary General supports Palestine's push for statehood recognition at the General Assembly.
As you know, the issue of who gets to be a member state is one for member states themselves to decide. The Secretary General's own position on encouraging the parties to move to a two-state solution has been repeated often, but the issue of actual membership to this organization and the status of your membership is one the member states. It's a decision for member states to make.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You want to try me one more time? Go ahead.
Yes. Sorry, Steph. I just kind of want to know what will the Secretary General going to do in Odessa?
He will. I mean, it's a chance for him to see firsthand the results of an initiative that he first presented when he went to Moscow and then went to Kyiv in April. Right, an initiative that is so critically important to hundreds of millions of people. That is part of a bigger package, which includes the export of Russian grain and fertilizer to market. So there you go. All right.
May I?
Go ahead,
Sorry.
Ben.
Just another follow-up to the to the travel. I mean, like, Lviv is in the west of the country very much. Odessa is obviously very much more under heat in the conflict, I guess. You told the Russian authorities that the SG will travel there. And
well, we just announced it publicly, and two of your colleagues in the Russian media are here. So,
okay.
But and as much as we love Gregory now, we have all of that has also been communicated to the Russian authorities.
And then just one last one from Odessa to Istanbul. How will the SG travel? I guess not by ship, but
no, not by ship, but for security reasons, and since I will also be on the delegation, I will not give you details of our transportation. Yes, sir.
Will the Secretary General be meeting with any Russian envoys or officials at the JCC?
Well, I mean, if he goes to the JCC, he will obviously see all the delegations, which includes our own, the Turkish delegation, the Russian delegation, and the Ukrainian delegation. And I have to say, all the reports we've been getting is that the representatives of all the member states, the Russians and the Ukrainians, and obviously, of course, the Turks, have been working in an extremely, extremely professional manner. And, I mean, we've seen all these joint inspections that any one country could object to have gone through. And I think it shows a lot of good faith on the part of the parties. Hasta la vista, Fahan. We'll have the con for the next few days.
I have hello.
Iftikhar, sorry, Iftikhar. Go ahead.
Thank you, Steph. You obliquely hinted about some other possibility during the Secretary General's trip to Ukraine. Is there any possibility of him making a side trip to Moscow?
No, I mean, the trip as it is being planned now will take us to Ukraine and to Turkey.
And Steph, when do we expect an announcement regarding the next UN High Commissioner for Higher Human Rights?
When it's ready. Thank you.
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.